Welcome to the Nordic Mythology podcast. I'm Daniel Farrand of the company Horns of Odin. As always, before we jump into the show, I do have to plug our Patreon. I know I say it every single week, but it's how we keep the lights on. It's literally the lifeline behind the show. So if you can pop over to Patreon/Nordic Mythology podcast, have a look on there. We have a bunch of bonus material. At this point, we've stacked up probably over 100 bonus episodes that you get to have. As soon as you join, you get the whole back catalogue. You can just binge it. And then all the ones in the future. It starts from £3 a month, so less than buying me or Mags a cup of coffee. It really is a bargain, and it genuinely helps us out. We're also doing our Viking smut episodes now. The last one went down pretty well. What do you think, Mags?
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. Well, nice way. Thanks for selling it there, Mags.
I'm in a reduced state today, Dan, which you are very aware of. So don't at me, bro.
No, we did. We found some lovely Viking erotica, and me, you, and Claire had an amazing time. It was a lot of fun. We laughed a lot. The audience and really enjoyed it. So if you want to hear that, I think we're going to release the first one for free just to tease everybody. But if you want to hear more of that, then they will be on our Patreon. And we had so much fun doing it. We all messaged each other after saying how much we loved it. So go and check that out. If you can't support via Patreon, just a like, share, subscribe, hit the little bell button on YouTube. All those little things do help new people find the podcast. But with that said, let's jump into the show. Really excited to have our guest back on. The last time we did a Christmas Yule special and spoke about the origins of St. Nicholas and the San Isidoro box. But this time we're going to talk about the Mammon and Ringerike art styles. So our guest today is Rebeca Franco Valle, and we're going to talk about decoding Viking art secrets in the style. And this is a lovely little introduction that Rebeca gave me, so I'm going to read it out in full to tease everybody for the episode and what's to come. So they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, but in the Viking age, it might have as well been worth 1,000 stanzas. Art was not just a decoration, it was a visual language, possibly even used to compose and recall poetry. In this episode, Rebeca guides us through the hidden meanings of Viking age imagery with a special focus on the Mammon and Ringerike styles. Could these swirling patterns and carved beasts hold forgotten stories? Tune in to uncover the secrets etched into Viking wood, stone, and metal. Rebeca Franco Valle is a Viking art historian and archaeologist specializing in Viking age art and material culture, specializing in the Mammon and Ringerike styles. She explores how Viking art may have encoded poetry and myths. Her interdisciplinary research links visual motifs to cultural shifts in the late Viking age. Thank you very much, Rebeca. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me here today.
You're welcome. Yeah, so last time we spoke, we covered St. Nick and the lovely, it was the San Isidoro box, right? I got that right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the box that brought everything. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful little box. I think that everybody should probably go and check out that episode at some point if you can. But we're going to talk about, it wasn't did you write your thesis on this?
Yeah, so about the box in San Isidoro, the Scandinavian box, that was my master thesis. But that kind of, when I finished my master thesis about this little box, it kind of kept on rolling and developed it into my PhD project, which is what's partially I'm gonna be talking a bit about today, because this little box the style of this little box is a transitioning example between Mammon and Ringerike style, and it was while I was researching about these styles and the meaning or the supposed meanings they had, and how the poetry interacts with material and myths and all that. That the idea for the PhD came while researching what was, if any, meaning in the box of Santiago, of San Isidoro was.
Mm-hmm. I was just
So the
seeing if I
idea came from there as well.
That's so cool.
I was just seeing if I could pull a picture of the little box up, but I can't. So for anybody that's just listening, it's San Isidoro's in SANISIDORO, because I know sometimes people struggle to catch the spellings of things, and it is just a beautiful little box of. Did we say it was bone?
It's most likely it's antler.
Antler.
Deer antler. 4 centimeters tall, and 3 centimeters diameter, with 2 metal lids at both
That's
sides.
very small.
It's very small, but it's super detailed in decoration, and is one of the most beautifully made pieces of this Mamen style, I think. It's also very hard to make because it is open work. It's not just carved on the surface, so it has all these holes going in and out where you can see whatever was inside this box once.
Oh wow!
So it's a masterpiece.
Wow.
Hang on, I'm gonna pop it up so we can all. Can we see this?
Yeah, there it
Oh
is.
yeah. Oh, it's
So-
yeah.
It's this stunning little box. And so the box is Mammon, you said.
It's a mix between Mamen and Ringerike style, so it's there
it's this
halfway
one here.
there. Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with a little, I guess, introductory. If this is somebody's first podcast, what are the two styles? Because obviously, guys, quickly, Viking and art is spread up into 5. Am I right?
5, 6. Yeah, that's, you can art as well how many styles there are. But
Okay.
yeah, roughly about 6 styles. Mamen and Ringerike style, they are 2 in the middle last style. So Mamen style developed from about 950 to the year 1000, and Ringerike style goes right after that one. So from around the year 1000 up until the 1030. And after Ringerike is when urnes develop, and this is the last style of the Viking Age. So these are the 3 late Viking Age art styles. But yeah, the interesting thing with both Mamen and Ringerike is that they are not so numerous. So there is not so many pieces made in these styles if you compare it to the other examples. So yeah, and to me they are also the most fascinating ones, because they are in this also transition period of the late Viking Age, when there is the conversion happening in the different North Scandinavian countries, and these styles developing at the same time. And of course, that's also reflected into the images you start to see in art. Yeah, that's roughly it.
Does each one have a specific list of characteristics that will make it that thing? I guess so people know what they're looking out for, because I mean, I've been doing it long enough now where I can generally kind of look and go, okay, that's Ernest, that's kind of Ringerike, and just have an understanding. But for most people, I guess they look at Viking art and just see beasties and swirls, and it all probably looks very similar, except like the ones that are really different.
Yeah, there is a list of characteristics, and there is also discussion about which characteristic belongs to each style, but roughly, yeah. I would say if you wanna have a quick guide for example, Mamen style, is look for those where you find these surfaces usually covered with dots or textured with some sort of small dots. If you see the for example, can you put the San Isidoro box again?
Of course I can.
So there is this small piece towards the top that has like some sort of like dotted area. Yeah,
This bit?
that's a very Mamen characteristic, for example.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that's something I've noticed on a lot. But yeah, so those dots are very Mammon. What
Yeah,
about Ringerike? Because I thought
Ringerike.
like this style was like more Ringerike here, but I could be completely
Yeah,
wrong.
to see the Ringerike style in this box, you would have to unroll the whole design because Ringerike style here is more about the composition lines of the whole design. So not so much about the details. So for example, that whole way in which there is like these thicker stems where you see that there is like this blue that wings those are wings for the bird, and then there
It
is
looks
the
so
leg.
much like a bird now, doesn't it? Now it's laid out like that.
Yeah, yeah.
You can really see the wings.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And you can also see the legs, right? Like the also in the top side a little bit in light blue. Those are the legs that
Oh, I
end
thought
up
these were
in
the
this claw.
wings.
No, those are the legs ending up in claws, and then the wings are the ones that
These
cross.
ones.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And they're more of a Ringerike characteristic.
Yeah. That in combination with the loop going around in yellow that goes all around.
With these.
Yeah. So that's a Ringerike characteristic.
So this is a
But of
mix
course,
then,
this
would
is
you
a
say?
mix. So yeah, it's not clear cut Ringerike or Mamen, but
Which I
it's
feel it
both at
very
the same
seldom
time.
is with Viking Age art. It's like we like to put things in like neat little categories, but then when you look at the material culture, it's very seldom like you do have cases that are nicely kind of one or the other, but in many cases, in my experience, they're usually like characteristics of many different styles going on at the same time. Would you agree with that, Rebecca?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's not beautiful when you study the characteristics and you say, that's nice. Let's find the styles, and then everything is mixed and nothing works.
It's like the Vikings didn't care about our characterizations of the stuff. It's very
It's
annoying.
like if it was a modern construction.
Yeah, I know. It's like it was a modern construction. How strange is that?
Okay. I mean, I feel like we could easily fall down into a bunch of questions of where the styles come from, why they're called what they're called, and all of that, which we've done in episodes before. So if anybody wants those answers, just type in Nordic Mythology Podcast on Viking art, and you're going to get a ton of different episodes we've done with a load of different artists and historians and scholars. So they'll give you the answers to the different styles, what they are, what they do. But this specifically, we're going to look at these two styles and how we can see those within the myths and sagas and poetry, which is exciting, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a starting point, do you think? Or is there a good place to begin with that?
So the starting point, I can start it how it started for me, which was the box. And
Sure.
from there, I started to wonder, of course, as always, when you see art, you always try to figure out, but what does it mean? What were they trying to represent? And all the times these questions we really want to know when there is truly usually not an answer to it, and we will probably never have it. But then I started wondering then how not what the images meant, but how they meant for the people.
Yeah.
So
just to quickly jump in, that's one thing I've recently, I think it was one of the last few times Luciano's been on here that really kind of flipped my mind a little bit, because I think through looking through our modern lens, you look at modern art and you assume that modern people will have some deep meaning behind it. And we look for this understanding of like, what could it actually mean? It's just a banana taped to a wall, but there has to be some deep meaning there. And then we look at, Viking art, and we just go, it's just a bunch of overs and unders, and not to demean it, but like it's just these squeals of birds and beasts, and but you don't think of it on that deeper level of what could it represent. And then it wasn't until, like I said, the more recent episodes where I'm like, oh no, maybe they are giving these messages through. And I think hopefully more people look at it in that light of that it's not just a beautiful piece of art. There is a story to be learned here, and there are messages to be sent, and meaning imbued within the art.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think so. And they were spending a lot of time, and this was, I think it would have been a waste if they would just use them for being pretty without any other use, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how it started, and then I started looking at the context where the San Isidoro box was found, which is this royal treasury in Spain, and I found that there is actually many of these nicely decorated little boxes, and in particular, there was a very interesting connection when seen together with some of the Islamic boxes that are found in the treasury, because they were coming to this treasury also in the same way that we think the Scandinavian box arrived. It was probably a diplomatic present. But the thing is that for the contacts between the Muslim areas in Spain and the North Spanish kingdoms, we have much more written sources on what was the artistic exchange and how these things were meaning in the context, and how they were also exchanging art and poetry together. So I started looking into this, and I found this fascinating wall, which I already studied a bit when I was studying in Spain, right? That is the Andalusian, the Al Andalus wall, where they are crafting these beautifully decorated pieces, also in bone and ivory, with all these motifs and decorations that are references to poetic poetic they are poetical references in their own context. So when they were giving these boxes away, they were not just giving this beautiful thing, but it was like a sort of poetry trigger or poetry inspiration device with it. And I thought that was an interesting perspective, and why wouldn't this happen also in the Viking context?
Mm-hmm.
Because as we know, the Viking Age and the Norse culture, they were, if any, they were big poets as well, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
100%.
So did you say that's an Andalusian bowl?
Yeah,
Was it a bowl?
in
Okay.
the box.
Box. Oh, I think you said. I
Yeah.
think you said bowl. Okay, so like an Andalusian box would have carvings of which kind of myths would they have on it? Or
Well, they have a bit of everything. They look a bit actually like the Mamen style boxes. They can be vegetal decorations, but also scenes representing musicians playing, or animals like lions and deers and birds doing a lot of things. And these are all coded references to poetical topos they have in Islamic poetry. Like,
okay,
for
so
example,
they're Islamic ones.
Yeah, they are Islamic.
Okay.
Yeah, but they appear encoded into the visual art, and sometimes they are even accompanied with inscriptions that refer to this poetry. They don't write the poetry itself, but they just refer to it in very subtle ways, also referring to the context of the boxes, because there is several of these boxes. They refer to the contents of the boxes, or to the texture of the ivory, and how this evokes the texture of a soft skin of a lady. Very beautiful things.
Oh, this is stunning, and this does look.
It does look a bit like Mamen style stuff, right?
It looks quite similar, especially considering
Yeah.
like the antler surface versus the ivory surface.
Yeah, but it's a lot more anthropomorphic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's got the human figures, and you can tell kind of what everything is. Oh, but that's beautiful.
It is. They are made in ivory, in elephant ivory, and they are roughly contemporary to Mamen style.
Oh wow, really? That's really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, I think they were leading the way. I think this might be a little bit more intricate.
Oh, come on now, Dan. Don't talk down the Viking Age styles like that. Different people did things differently.
Look at the detail on this, though. I thought the other ones were detailed. Oh, wow. They're on par. They're equals.
Ah,
yeah.
Nice save.
Oh, that's stunning. So you saw these. You could see the stories in them, and wondered why
I
not
saw
the
this.
Vikings.
I saw some of them contain poetical references visually represented, and I thought, well, why not? The Vikings were doing the same thing. And then I started researching on how these boxes were used in their own context, in the Islamic context, and I found that it was actually a practice in the Islamic Spain to use all these beautifully decorated things, being boxes or trays or whatever, to compose poetry during social gatherings. So, for example, we find texts from the Islamic context also in the beginning of the 11th century or the end of the 10th century, where they describe all these receptions in the palaces, and where they bring these presents to the caliph, and the caliph then challenges the courtesans, the people with him in the court, to take those pieces and compose a poem out of it. And I thought, well, this should have happened also, I guess, in Scandinavian context, because they are very close in time. They are also close visually, and they are also big poets, right? And then that is where I started also looking into how, if there was Norse texts informing us also into these poetic compositions based on in art and visual representations. And there is actually several references to this that appear in several poems composed after representations in their period art.
Okay.
So
yeah, I've come across a couple of those too. That's really interesting to hear that you've come across that as well, because that's something I've been looking into quite recently, and it's been more difficult than I imagined to find those sources, but they are there.
Yeah, they are there, and I think they are very interesting to see together with the material. I know they have been.
Sorry, are these sources that had it? I guess they just mention a box or an art style, or
They are not art styles, because the art styles is something we have invented in the present or in the in the past years. But they mention situations where they a poet composes a poem following something he's seen, and this could be, for example, decoration in the walls, decorations of scenes with mythology of Thor killing the Jormungand, or I don't know, the burial of Balder, and all these scenes, and the poets compose a poem based on what they see. There is also, for example,
Okay.
some
So
taking an axe and composing a poem based on the decoration that they are seeing in the axe,
Yeah.
and things like that.
so yes, that's the inspiration behind
Yeah.
and I think, again, going back to what I said earlier, this is that different mindset of us looking at it and not understanding versus the peoples of the day with the context and the knowledge of, being a contemporary person, looking at, oh yeah, obviously that's the story of so and so, that's this. Whereas we're looking at kind of trying to deconstruct it, and it looks a little bit not messy, but harder to grasp. Whereas, to a contemporary, it's just is.
Yeah, it's almost like trying to read something in the different, like, it's not completely the same, but it's kind of similar to trying to read something in a different language, where it's like you can maybe recognize a few words or sentence structures here and there, but you can't necessarily read the language fluently just like from seeing the text the first time. That's I would say that's like the closest comparison I've found to looking at Viking Age art today versus from back then. I don't know, would you agree with that, Rebecca? That I've tried to like find modern comparisons. That's the closest one that I've found, where it's like, to us some of the things make sense, but like putting it all together isn't necessarily as intuitive that it would have been back then.
Yeah, but this is definitely, it's like trying to make a puzzle having just 5 of the 1,500 pieces,
Exactly. It's like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle and then not having, first of all, you don't have like the lid of the box showing you what the picture is supposed to look like to begin with. And then you're also missing a bunch of puzzle pieces.
Yeah, so you are
no
just left
corners
with
either.
these little things, and then you see, oh yeah, I see a leg here. So it's so yeah, definitely, it's a very good analogy. But yeah, it's a bit like that.
So, do we have any specific examples of how we see these represented in poems? And also, does it only go, or are there only examples of it going in that direction, as in they see an item and then a poem is constructed after, or can it happen the other way, where maybe a poem is constructed and then the item is made after? Is that possible?
Yeah, it is curious, because we usually, when we try to see in the objects, we are trying to go the other way around. Like, we have the Eddas, and then we have the mythology, and we have the sagas, and we are trying to look at this art, trying to put it together, to find what is in these few texts we have into all this visual culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it was actually, in the past, it was much more the other way around. It was, they were making things, with their background of references, of visual references, of on how a cat looked like and all that. But then in the end, when they were doing these things, it was much more like not trying to replicate the stories, but trying to slightly refer them to create something new.
Yep.
That, like composing a new poem every time you were doing one of these pieces, right?
Yeah.
It was
so it's like a visual poem more than a worded poem. It's like you are. It's almost. I don't know if I agree with this, even though I'm going to say it, but it's almost like a game of telephone, where someone starts a story and then you hear it one time and then you repeat it to someone else who haven't heard the story. But where like the game of telephone is that you're supposed to like retell it as accurately as possible. Here it's more like, okay, we have this story and then we're going to retell it, but we're going to retell it perhaps in a slightly different way, using different poetic techniques. And since it's visual, you don't have necessarily control of the word that people will think of when they see it, but they will kind of get the meaning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah. And actually, that's actually how styles happen in the end, how styles transition to one another, because it's in the end, it's not that they are copying from natural, they are copying from one thing that was previously made. So when they are trying to represent, for example, a lion or a dragon, they are not copying a dragon from natural, obviously.
What?
But they are copying from
Not a
from
real
another
dragon?
dragon, but it was made. Yeah. And that's why I also find sometimes very difficult when they ask me, what is represented here? Is it a wolf or is it a dog? And I was like,
it's almost like, I don't know if that's the point.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess to a Viking Age Scandinavian, a lion is as much of a dragon as anything else.
Yep.
They're not seeing lions. They may have heard of one and maybe seen a dead one, maybe if like a pelt's been given, but or a story of somebody who's traveled far and worked in and around, Greece-ish, maybe, and they've kind of gone over and seen one somewhere. I don't know. It's not really happening very easy. Maybe they're coming across a dead one. So it's very much a mythical beast, isn't it? This cat-like, this giant cat with huge hair and fangs, and it's going to rip you to shreds. Like, that's a terrifying. That's a monster. If you've never seen a lion and somebody describes that to you, you're like, yeah, that's scary.
That being said, I haven't checked whether. I mean, I assume that they would have been here in the Viking Age. That being said, we do have some sorts of big cats in Scandinavia. We do have like mountain lions and stuff like that. Okay. Though they're slightly different and they're not necessarily as big, the Scandinavian ones, as lions, but they would have had natural references to build those mythical lions off of, I would imagine.
Yeah, or they would also see them in the Mediterranean. There is statues of them everywhere. So if they were going to Istanbul or Rome, they would probably see these quite naturalistic lions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even then, that would be passed back in a game of telephone, because there's one person who goes to see it, who goes home and says, amongst all the other things that they've seen, goes, I also saw this massive cat, and it was, and that then gets told onto people, and the line's getting bigger every time because the mother is telling her best friend that her son saw this giant cat that is now, she's proud of her son. He's been out there doing things, and this cat is the size of the house, and now it's massive, and she's just like, and it escalates, doesn't it? I just had a thought then, because lions are big cats, right? And maybe you had like bigger wild cats, but not like lion size at the time. And Nordic dragons are kind of just like big snakes. Do you think that could have, because they're not really seen as like winged dragons as everybody thinks of. When you say dragon, you think of like a flying reptile, whereas it seems as though within the sagas they're more just like a giant venomous snake. Is it possible? I don't know. I'm thinking this through as I'm saying it. Maybe it follows that similar sort of path, though, that snakes exist and venomous snakes exist. Whether I don't know if venomous snakes in Scandinavia exist, but
no, not really.
But people will have encountered them on their travels.
Yep.
They will have seen a snake that will have bit somebody and they've got poisoned by it and possibly died. And then that lore maybe just gets passed through and inflated, and it becomes this bigger thing. And then suddenly you've got a dragon that wraps around, and it's actually just this big giant snake. Does that make sense? Am I crazy? Could there be something to that? Maybe.
No, to me it makes all the sense. It's
You're very polite.
yeah.
No, but
No,
it
but that's
does.
how I explain also the stylization. So how do they start making, for example, these Valkyrie figurines all look like less and less like humans and more like things that we are not able to identify anymore, or what they really represent or what they wear and all that. This is just because they are copying one thing from one copy from one copy from one copy up until the thing becomes the representation itself.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
And I
the
guess
snake stops being the snake and becomes a dragon at some point,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
and it
and
exists in this. Yeah.
it's not as though we don't have like abstract art either. Like if you looked at, I don't know art very well, but if you looked at Van Gogh's pieces, the only one that I could think of off the top of my head, if you took that literally, you'd be like, Jesus Christ, people were ugly when Van Gogh was drawing. Like that's what people looked like. If let's say in 1,000 years, that's all we had for reference. We just had these Van Gogh paintings, and they were like,
If you want to speak from a Scandinavian tradition as well, if you go by like Edvard Munch's depictions of people,
everyone has like big mouths, and they're all really scared of everything.
yeah, or in some of his like lesser known international pieces, people look really sick. Like they're all elongated and greenish, or really, really, really pale. Like they're not naturalistic at all, and that's not the point either. To what you said earlier, Rebecca. Like the point isn't to give an like naturalistic, accurate representation. It's about giving an interpretation of something. And that something could be a story. It doesn't have to be something that actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
I can't help but think now. Imagine if the war, this terrifying war that's happening in the Middle East now, and somehow it all goes to pot, but the only thing that really survives is the Monk Museum, and then we all have like, because I think about this sometimes with the Vikings, like the bits we find are just the little bits we find. There is so much that's just lost to time that we will never find. So you're basing so much on these isolated things, like the Osterberg ship.
Yep.
There is so much based on the Osterberg ship. It's an amazing find, but there's nothing to say that's not just a monk museum of the past, or just like one isolated thing that maybe that was an anomaly. It was really weird for them. They were like, "What the fuck are you doing that for?
Absolutely.
That's crazy." And like, what if that happened in like the future? Did we just, this weird thing was just found, and they went, "Oh my god, everyone was really strange."
Yeah.
They were all just really like long and weird, and they don't actually like that because we've got the skeletons, so we know they're not like that, but they thought they looked like that or something. What? This is odd.
That is fun. Anyway, but I'm really curious, Rebecca, with because I think it's really intriguing what you're saying. So, also from kind of a self-interested perspective from my end, since I'm working with a very similar line of thought on earlier material, how do you see poet, like, or how do I want to phrase this? How would you first of all say that poetry is present in Mammen and Ringerike styles? And if yes, how do you interpret, like, not necessarily what the poetry means, but what are poetic features in the art? Like, what would that be? What would it look like from your interpretation?
Yeah, so I would say the references are there, and this becomes very evident, for example, in monumental art, like the stones, or even though it's not really monumental, but maybe some of the wooden carvings where there is references to mythologies, being this Christian or Norse.
Mm-hmm. So monumental art meaning art that is present on like very big things.
Yeah, like not your small brooches.
Yeah.
You can see it much more clear in these big instances, but also in the small ones. And a very easy example is just the crosses, because those are universal references to Christianity and to Christ, but they also appear in other small things that are not so directly connected to Ringerike or Mamen style, but only tangentially connected because they can appear in similar contexts. Like, for example, the small figurine pendants of the ladies carrying a horn.
Yep.
Which some scholars have connected this to kennings for women, like the horn bearer.
Mm-hmm.
That's, for example, a visual reference, I think, a very direct one. And then there is other images that refer to other kennings for Odin, for example. Like, there is these figurines with warriors with these hornet helmets that end up in faces of eagles, and that's perhaps a reference to this kenning for Odin that is the eagle headed.
Yeah.
So there is a couple of those that it is an isolated motive that you can really link easily with these motives in poetry.
Mm-hmm.
But then in the styles, going back to Mamen and Ringerike styles, it's hard to detect direct references to texts
Sure.
because I don't think they really wanted to have, or they really didn't have that many references to the text we know today.
Thank you so much. I love, because you know what drives me nuts sometimes is when we find visual media, visual art, and there is this, and I understand that wish, I really do, but there is this wish to immediately try to kind of retrofit that art into a story that we know. And like Dan said earlier, we do not by any means have a complete list of all the stories that they would have had. So why would all the art that we find fit into the stories that we know of?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
I think.
And this is actually, there was a study by Signe Hornfuglesand trying to take these poem descriptions of objects from the Viking Age, and trying to figure out if there is images preserved today into Viking art that fit one-on-one to these descriptions. There was only actually one that you could tell with most certainty that it was the same image as in the poem.
Which one? Do you remember which one that was? Because I've read that study too, but it's been a while.
Yeah, this was from the poem. I think it was the Hustrapa. I can't remember, but the scene that is described is the burial of Balder, and most concretely the moment when the boat of Balder has to be pulled into the sea, and they cannot pull it. The gods cannot pull it, so they need to call from help from this giantess called the Hirokin, and she comes riding a wolf with reins that are snakes.
Such a fucking badass.
Yeah.
She comes riding a wolf and her reins are snakes. That is girl boss energy right there.
Yeah, that's an entrance. That's
super, super specific.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out that there is this picture stone in Sweden, this carved stone, that it was originally part of an ensemble called the Hunestad ensemble, where you can see one of these figures of something that looks like a woman, though we don't know exactly what it is. But the fact is that it is riding something like that looks like a wolf with reins that are a snake, and you can see that very clearly.
Wow.
And there is so far I have been looking also into, I don't know, European stories that have similar mythological tales that tell about somebody riding a beast. that could be also rain with snakes, and I haven't been able to find anything anywhere so
Oh,
far.
okay.
So this is probably one of the few examples where we can find one of these motifs in the describing poetry, which, if you are interested in knowing, these are called ekphrases, these poems that describe images.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So this is the only example where an ekphrasis from Old Norse and an image from Viking Age period find parallel.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Also, Mike's first, this is how corrupt my mind has become since we started doing Viking sport. Because as soon as the Hurricane Kind was described, and I was like, I wonder if I can find a Viking smut story about this.
Jesus.
that could work well. That was that was the first thing that came to my mind. I'm like, well, I'm going to be googling that when I finish this, aren't I?
You naughty boy.
Okay, let's see what I can find. The one that jumps to the forefront of my mind that maybe could fit into this, and because we only just did an episode on it, and it's one that I'm really interested in, is, I guess it's not a poem, but in like in Snorri's Edda, his description of the Hungnir's heart and the possibility of it being like a 3-pointed symbol. Does that fit into this category? And it
Well, not
possibly
really,
being...
because remember how we talked about it, how also that description is like, it's both like specific and vague at the same time.
That's why I wasn't sure whether it would fit into like that kind of
So the
category
question
of like a possibility, or...
so I'll let you also answer this, of course, Rebecca, but like the question in my mind would be, to what extent has Snorre made an effort to specify this description? And then if he has tried to make it more specific, then it wouldn't necessarily be an ekphrasis if we find it in art, because we don't know whether that description is authentically from the time period when this art was made.
As in, he could have seen it and then...
As in, if he comes across a vague description, he tries to make it more specific for his audience in the 1300s, then his description from the 1300s would not be accurately an ekphrasis if found in art from the 900s, because there are 400 years in between where we don't know whether this description was used at the time.
Again.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah, that's the other thing. In this case of this description, I think it's a Husrapa. The fact is that it appears in Snorri, the one I'm talking about, but it also appears in the Laxdæla saga. So there is 2 references for the same poem.
Yep.
And that's also very interesting, because it's two different sources referring to the original one that was probably from the end of the 10th century, describing this scene.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, it's... Yeah.
I was going to say, would that be... with something like that, where it's very specific and it jumps out at you. Now, I don't know whether it would have the same effect in a world where people believe in, or whether they directly believe in or not, we don't know, but have, dragons and people that rise from the dead and all this other stuff that's in the myth. To us, like that story of a giant lady on a wolf with snake reins is very kind of like, that's different, that's really cool, and kind of sits out. So is it possible that that's just a cool thing to them, and that's just a story that pretty much everybody knows and everybody tells, so it wouldn't have a direct link to the piece of art? It's just that it just so happens to have turned up in a piece of art and also in a poem, because it's just a thing that kind of coexists amongst the people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of makes sense. What's your take on that, Rebecca?
I don't know if I completely understand.
So what you're saying, Dan, is that they don't have to be connected, even though it's a story. People like if it's a cool feature that people talk about or tell, and then it shows up at art, they might not be connected to each other. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So if I'm trying to think of an example, I can't think of one off the top of my head. But let's say you have a just a story from the mythology. So let's say Tia's hand getting bit off by Fenrir. That's like a really popular story that pretty much most people would know.
We think.
We think.
We don't
but let's
know.
Just, no, we don't know. But let's just say we know that that's like a super popular that gets passed around the campfire. Everybody understands that story. If then one person creates a poem and then one person carves a stone, they could both have the same origin place but develop separately.
You know what I think is funny with what you're saying right now, Dan? Is that
and are maybe not linked, not that it's gone to the stone and then from the stone to the...
You know what I think is fun, Dan? Is that I think you're saying exactly what Rebecca is referring to.
Are we? Have I misunderstood?
Which is that no.
I mean, that would make more sense.
No, not misunderstood. No. I think you've hit the nail on the head. If I understand what you're saying correctly, Rebecca, is that these things exist at the same time, and different people are continuously doing their own takes on it.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I thought we were going down that there was like a linear link from like story to art to poem.
No, I wouldn't say it. It would be much more messy. It would be every way all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
An exchange between both languages, or that's how I say it. It's how it happens now, actually, also.
Yep.
Because we have stories, but there is all the time all these fanfic and reinventions of the stories that become new stories at the same time. Mm-hmm. And these go visually, these go also textually. They are in constant movement. And this was also happening back then. They were very creative people in every technique, both artistic and visual, and wood carving and smithing and bronze casting and goldsmithing and poetry. So I don't think there was this collection of myths that everyone was all the time representing and referring to, but it was something much more in movement and much more alive.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But I think that's actually really cool that you said that, Dan, because from my perspective, I didn't think about thinking about this as a linear progression, because to me, since I'm used to working with this material, it's obvious to me that this would have been super messy, like you said, Rebecca. But then again, for all of everyone else outside of our field, it's not necessarily...
It could be super obvious for everyone but me.
No.
I don't worry.
No, but I don't think so. So I think it's good that you said just that one line, like that, just that one phrase of like a linear progression, because I think that's almost referring to the way that we use these modern categorizations today, right, Rebecca, that we talked about earlier, that we like things to be ordered in a very neat line. Mm-hmm. Like one thing influences one thing and then that progresses to another thing. But then in the real past, it would have been a lot more chaotic and messy.
Yeah. I mean, when we see something very neat and in progression, it's usually something that modern archaeologists have created to try to make sense of the past.
Yep. Yep.
Like textiles.
Yep, that's so wow, that is the quote from this episode. I love that, Rebecca. Thank you.
It's
I'm sorry, Dan. The past is messy. We keep coming up to this every time, but
try to explain it, but
it is something that we come across almost every week, and it's so frustrating because I don't know of a better way to do it either, because you have it's almost like people's progression when they're learning this stuff, that you start out with no knowledge, so then you get the little boxes that's been created by certain scholars throughout history, and you kind of get that information, and then you go to the next level that you're like, actually, it's a lot more complex and fluid than that. I need to forget that and then move on up and realize that it's all just chaos, and a lot of it's all just theories of scholars based on theories of scholars based on theories of other scholars, and we don't actually really know much at all if you take it back. And then you kind of get to this level of working up, but then if you're me, you find yourself in constant conversations, I'm going to say conversations in quotation marks, online with people who are like at that first level and have no interest because it's not they're interested in it, but it's not like their life. So they don't have the interest in kind of breaking that boundary and having that kind of, it's all way more complex than that. So they have these lovely little boxes that scholars have given, and they'll quote the scholars and say, well, so-and-so says it's this. And you're like, no, but it can be that, but it also could be this. And it could also be this other thing. And it's all just kind of maybe theories. And you're like, open your mind. And they're like, shut the fuck up. So-and-so said it's this. Now, that's what I'm sticking with. And it's just, but I don't know how you neaten that up for people. Because you can't make it more simple.
Oh, can I just say this is a nice plug for people to watch this episode on YouTube when it comes out, because during Dan's whole little rant there, you can have
I held my breath.
You can have the pleasure of just seeing Rebecca and I just smiling and just nodding, just be like, yes, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, Dan.
And you try to do a PhD and everything falls apart because it's all an invention.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's so. I don't know, because on a serious note, I don't know what the answer is, because I think it also creates such a disconnect between scholars and
the everyday
person.
But let's try to put a pin in that, and maybe we could have Rebecca on for another episode and talk about how do we navigate the styles, because that is a whole different conversation, I would say. How do we navigate modern categorizations, but also making room for the flexibility and the chaos of the past? Yeah. I think we should do an hour and a half just on that a different time.
Yeah. No, I mean, the classifications, they are necessary. We need them to learn, because otherwise, as you say, then there is only chaos beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very necessary to approach the past in these categories and in these little boxes that we have created. And then after you learn the boxes, you can think outside of them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Morpheus when he has those two little pills in his hand, and he's like, if you take this pill, you're gonna realize that it's actually all bullshit and we don't know anything and it's all theories. And you're like, give me the fucking pill, Morpheus. But then you're just always walking around people who don't have that, and you're just like, you motherfuckers, because you can't argue back either, because what they're saying isn't wrong.
Nope.
Yeah.
You're just like, that is right, but also. All right, down to the hour. You said that's the only example we have of
that's one-to-one?
Direct one-to-one.
Yeah, most likely, because never is 100% obviously, but this is the one where we identified an ekphrasis, which is a poem made out of images, and actually an image that this corresponds with the ekphrasis, the hieroglyph in the Hunenstadt monument.
What about the stuff on cross shafts? Because I have a big interest in going and seeing cool cross shafts in England, and obviously we have a few that have stories with Sigurd on, especially the one with him burning his thumb, and do they count?
Yeah, there is no ekphrasis for those stories. That's the problem, but they do connect very much with the mythological stories going around in Europe. So there is, beyond the poetry wall, there is also the reference to mythology that we can identify in some images as well. It's not that everything is devoid of mythological context in here. But the ones with the Sigurd myth, they could well refer to it. And then we also have to have in account that this Sigurd myth is something much more extended, that it is not only a Norse myth, is something that was there also before in Germany and so forth. So it's a much more extended myth. So it makes sense to find it.
Yeah. Are there, again, not to just categorize stuff, are there categories within that where some, let's, for example, something like, I don't know if you're familiar with it, the bound devil stone, which is a suspected image of Loki. Probably not, but it's been kind of categorized as being Loki. But then you have something like the Sigurd, the Sigurd stone, where he's like sucking his thumb. Is there like a categorization of ones that are more plausible than the others? If that,
there is no, well, not a categorization, but they have been discussed very much on how certain we can be that they refer to the Norse mythology. And for example, the ones with the Loki binding, because you're talking about these ones that they appear like with a knot around their wrists, right?
Yeah.
That is much more difficult to tell, because that's the only reference that there is in that image to the myth is somebody with tied hands, nothing else. And this is a motif that appears in other instances of European art of the 10th century. Like, for example, in the Apocalypse myths, you find, for example, the devils tied in hell, also with a very similar kind of knotting around the wrists. So it could be something else. Another myth that might be represented in one of the runestones, and this is the Altuna runestone, I think, that might be referring to one of the Old Norse myths. For example, the one of Odin going into a fishing trip, and he goes, sorry, not Odin, Thor, going into a fishing trip, and he goes with one of his friends. I don't remember his name, but the thing is that he wants to fish the Jormungand, and he uses as a bait the head of a cow for this. So there is one of these stones where you can see somebody in the boats, and then he's fishing, and then you see something that looks like a cow head hanging from the rod, which doesn't look like absolutely like a naturalistic cow, but you can kind of intuit. But then the thing that gives away the whole detail of the myth is that you can see one of the feet going under the boat, one of the feet of the person, Thor, going in the bottom of the boat towards the water. And this is, if you look in the myth, it's described that when he tries to pull the rod with the Jormungand, he pulls so hard that his foot it trespasses the floor of the boat and goes into the water. So that can be another one where you can, with a high degree of certainty, tell that is representing one of the myths.
Well, I don't know if you've listened to our episode with Ryan Eckerson, but that he thinks that myth is represented in the stars, which is fascinating, and I would definitely recommend checking that out, because that was an episode that blew me and Mags away.
I haven't seen it.
I would encourage it. He brought a lot of visual aids too. He had a very different take. Well, not necessarily different in like dissimilar, but he had a different point of entry to it from us, Rebecca, which was really interesting.
Nice. But I have to check it out.
Yeah, but I would really love to do an episode with you on the categorizations, Rebecca, because I work with them also so much, but at the same time, they frustrate me to no end, but I also need them. But it's like, and then how can we as archaeologists and like I guess we're like closing in on like being art specialists in a way when it comes to Viking art, I guess, compared to other people. Like, how can we use our knowledge to make things easier for those from outside of the field?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How can we use the Viking art styles beyond themselves, actually? Because if you just you study the art styles, and then there is a point where you learn the characteristics and you learn the categorization and the chronologies, and stops there.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we transcend the system in a way that this classification keeps on being useful beyond just putting things in this nice timeline, right?
Exactly. Are you up for that, Dan? Would you be up for an episode like that?
Of course. I'm
Yeah.
up for anything.
Okay. All right.
Well, I'll save that for the extra episode. All right, let's wrap this up. I know that we're both feeling a little sorry for ourselves, Mags. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us. This was as fun as always. Do go back and listen to the one on the San Isidoro box.
Yes.
It is fascinating, and we will do another one on the categorization. Where can people find you, Rebecca, on the line?
You can find me on LinkedIn if you like, in academia.edu, and in Instagram. So if you Google my name, Rebeca Franco Valle, you will probably get all my social media. But if you're interested, for example, in my Instagram, is Within the North.
Yes.
Have it. Mags, where can people find you? I also realized I didn't introduce you today. So
I noticed, but
I'm so sorry.
but I just it's fine.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Don't even worry about it. People can find me on currently mostly just on Instagram. That's at Archeomags, Archeo with a K.
So I'm going to own up to this really quickly. So there's I found this little thing that underneath our names, I can give us like an extra little title. And I was gonna write in-house archaeologist, but then I didn't trust myself to spell archaeologist. I started typing out and I was like, I don't trust myself to get that 100% correct and put it up and just sit here and look like an idiot. So I was like, I'm not going to do that now.
But to your point, Dan, you can't really go wrong because there are a lot of different spellings of archaeologists.
Yeah, that's what I would have said.
Yep.
Google could have helped. Yes, you're right. Yep. But I'd rather just make myself look silly. For me, it's Daniel_Farron1, Horns Voting for the Business, Nordic Mythology podcast across the board on all the different platforms. Like I say, YouTube, definitely go and check that out. It's adds another little aspect to it, being able to watch the episodes. We pull stuff up, we reference things, and you can see our little smiles. There we go.